Hello, listeners. We are here for episode number 2, and I'm so excited about this because I have met this wonderful woman in just 6 weeks, developed such a great relationship with her, and have been so inspired by her. Today, I'm interviewing ERIKA Sinner, who not only founded the company Directory, but is CEO. And she found the time to write an amazing book and launch a mission on how we can better support people coping with pet loss grief. So, Erica, welcome to my episode.
Oh my gosh, Erica, thank you so much for having me. I feel so honored to be here and to get to talk about it. This is awesome.
Thank
And
you.
just that we got to meet. I'm so excited about all the things we're going to do together. It's amazing.
Me too, me too. And so, for our listeners, I think it's really good if we just go ahead and use my new nickname, which is Eric Cat, to just differentiate who's talking. So, if you use my name, try to use Eric Cat. I think it's just cute and fun and a little bit lighthearted about this heavy, heavy subject.
I love that.
So, you guys, I was introduced to Erica because we have a very similar mission, and I realized teaming up with her would really accelerate getting this mission done, which is to provide validation for pet loss, but also support for it, and actually see people get paid time off for pet bereavement,
Yeah.
which I wasn't sure I could accomplish in my lifetime. I did not know how. And then I met Erica, and she's like, "Oh yeah, it's already implemented here, here, and here. I've been doing it," and I'm like, "Holy moly, hallelujah! This is amazing." So, Erica, can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with Kingston? Um, and how it affected you so that you also felt inspired and drawn to do something about it.
Absolutely. My husband and I have been married for 9 years. And when we decided to get married, we knew we were not going to have human kids. We were going to always have dogs. And so Kingston was our firstborn. He was a golden Shar, a beautiful little black mask. He was a little boss baby. But he was our first, and then we ended up with four. I founded my company 6 years ago, and part of that has always been around this idea of empathy-driven leadership. I think as a woman CEO, really thinking about what is corporate culture, how do we want our employees to feel on Sunday night before they come to work that following Monday or whatever your work week schedule is. Really recognizing that the life outside of work impacts employees at work. And for me, one of those ways is showing people in black and white that I do care and I do understand. And that was pet bereavement leave. So I've always had pet bereavement leave as part of our policy since I founded the company. I knew I was going to need it when the time came for our family. I think last year, when it actually happened in May, we lost Kingston on the 22nd. I took the time off, and I did not appreciate how I would feel taking the time off. I think I had it in my policy. My employees could absolutely take advantage of it too, but I still felt a lot of shame in taking time off, that people wouldn't understand, that they would think he's just a dog. Can't she get it together? I also think as a woman CEO, you wonder, am I doing a good job? Am I showing up the way that I'm supposed to? And I don't know. I was inspired to write a book and really talk about my experience because I realized if I, in my position, owning my company, having it in my policy, I know I couldn't have gotten through it without having some of that space to process my emotions, that I can only imagine the weight it would carry for somebody who is an employee and doesn't have access to having some time off.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And I also had those same questions to myself. Why can't I get it together? What is
Yeah.
going on? I'd never experienced, for some of us and the listeners that haven't experienced pet loss in a real intense degree, or maybe haven't found their soul animal, or maybe they have lost it. I think a lot of people relate to that experience, but we don't know what to do about it. And that's
That's
what
right.
really threw me, right? It was, oh, tomorrow will be better, right? Tomorrow will be
Mhm.
better, right? And
Mhm.
then after weeks, you're like, I'm not okay. So, can you tell us a little bit about what really helped you during that time? So you took the time off,
Mhm.
and then you started asking yourself, how do I look as a leader?
Mhm.
What are people going to think? And so how did you get yourself really to where you are today? And I know it's not a simple leap, but can you talk us a little bit about what worked for you?
Absolutely. So for us, our story got a little worse last summer. 21 days after Kingston passed, Edmund was diagnosed with an aggressive cancer. And so we had a full on cancer battle last year with all of his cancer treatments. And, part of me felt I still was reeling from the guilt of losing Kingston, that I couldn't save him. And here I am trying to keep Edmund now. Um, I think taking the time off and having the time is one thing that I think we need to create some space for employees to be able to have the time to grieve. But grief is also really patient, to your point that you just made of like, you think I'm going to get better, and then you continue to still not feel better. Because I think you do have to process your emotions, which is why I'm so in love with what you do and the cards that you have, because I think that's actually part of processing your emotions is acknowledging them and thinking through them. Um, but for me, I wrote a book about the experience. I think one was to just get it all out and to help somebody else feel seen. I think anytime you can help someone else through your own pain, it's healing. And
Mhm.
in that, I shared also that I ended up going to my doctor. I really tried to not pay attention to the grief. I tried to work out harder, throw myself into work, keep myself busy, distract myself from actually feeling the pain. And I think that that's also something that's worth talking about and having a conversation about, is normalizing that the grief is so hard that going to therapy is absolutely appropriate. um, I still hadn't gotten there myself. Even when I went in to talk to my therapist, I wondered if they would even be a little judgy around what is it that you're struggling with. But truly, I mean, it is that hard. And even to have Dr. Lawler at my book signing as a clinical psychologist to say, yes, it is this difficult, and here's all the reasons why. um, I would say for anyone listening to, if you've lost some pets and you didn't feel what you felt with another pet, I also really believe that every animal has its own unique soul. So I loved what you just said of your soul dog or your soul cat or your soul animal. I think pets are just like people, where you have really unique relationships with each of them. And so when you lose somebody in your life, some might impact you more than others. And Kingston was that for me. So I think, the therapy, I still go to therapy. I'm still working through it. And it's been since May of last year. We did a lot of really unique approaches within therapy. Some have been around like the box analogy, where if you're having those intrusive thoughts, to put it in a box and say, we're going to talk about it in therapy, so that you're not feeling like you're having to manage it every single day. We also did EMDR therapy, which is it's an approach that the government has actually been using for post-traumatic stress in the military, and it's now just coming out for everyday use with us and the general public. And that was really helpful. It's a unique approach where it's helping you go back and it's almost like reassigning the right emotions to the experience that you had, and not just trying to push it down or not deal with it. So the day that Kingston passed, that day for me was a traumatic experience. I write about that in my book too, where there's nothing peaceful about it. Even when you try, it's still going to be really hard. And I kept going back to the moment that he took his last breath. And even now I get a little emotional about it. But I was having a traumatic response in terms of my body was shaking. I was getting really upset. I couldn't shake the thought from my mind. I was driving at one point and I had the thought come across my mind, and I swerved the car. Yeah. And so I was talking to my therapist, where I was like, something's going on here. And I don't know what to do about it. I don't know why this one moment continues to be there. And that's where she said, because it's a traumatic experience, right? You watched a soul cross over, and it was someone you really cared about. And of course, this can happen. And so EMDR is this really beautiful approach of, for me, it was holding on to these little vibrating they look like little rocks. And what she does is she's talking to you and she's bringing you back to the experience. And then she's also asking questions of, where is Kingston now? And for me, I'm like, he's safe. Like, it can't happen again. He's not there. The day has passed. It was a really horrible thing that happened, but it's not actively happening. And so as we're talking about the experience, but then also reminding me, every time she would remind me and I would get to say, he's not in pain now, the little rocks would shake. And what it does is it brings your body back to you, so that you're not spiraling in your mind. It can bring you back to like, oh, okay, I'm here in my therapist office. He is not in pain. Everything is okay. I miss him, but nothing's going on with him today. And that's how the reassignment happens, the rewiring in your mind, to know it was a really horrible thing that happened. And we can be sad about it and we can cry, but it isn't something that you're not in a fight or flight response every time you think about it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
This is the first time I've heard of this technique and seen it applied to grief, and I'm so excited. Do you know where people can find a therapist that is trained in this?
Yes. So I think therapy, getting access to therapy right now is tough. I think since 2020, I've read there's a spike in trying to get a therapist. I know for me, it took some waiting to get in, but you can Google your therapist and put EMDR. So it is truly just EMDR training, and some are even able to do it virtually. So you don't have to be in person. There's other methods. I think there's three modalities to be able to do it. I just know mine is through the little rocks. But yeah, you can absolutely ask your therapist, are you trained in EMDR? I would love to try that approach.
That's amazing. I know a lot of therapists now. So I had a counselor over Zoom and we had a little introductory session just so I knew I could feel vulnerable with her and tell her, hey, I think I've lost my mind.
Yes.
I can't focus
Yeah.
and I don't know if I'm going to be okay. I mean, that takes a lot of trust to say those types of sentences.
Yes.
So I encourage anyone that's listening, if you're stuck in your grief or you're having some traumatic responses, because I also experienced that, try going to our website and looking up. We have some counselors on there, and bereavement coaches. See if they'll do a trial with you, or like Erica said, if you go to Google, which now I'm going to do and look up and see if there's a database of these people, say, hey, could you do a 5-minute consult with me? Because I want to know if I'm comfortable with you. And,
Yeah.
not to speak on behalf of the profession, but I do know that some of the people that I have listed will work on a sliding scale. So guys, I know out-of-pocket expenses are can be really high for any type of therapy or counseling. So that don't let that inhibit you. See if someone will work on a sliding scale. And I really think that if we plead our case as humans and say, hey, I'm not able to function, and we talk to our boss or HR, like
Yeah.
I'm all about there are solutions. We just have to find them and ask for them. And it is okay to ask for help, you guys.
Yeah.
Um,
I would
Erica,
also say too, even beyond the therapy, I went to my primary care physician too. I think that is also important. And that was a big realization for me. Directory, we help pharmaceutical companies bring really important medications to market. So here I am working in the life science space, and my initial gut reaction wasn't to go to my doctor. I still was like, is this real? Why is this so hard? Why am I hurting so badly? Um, but it was, after Kingston passed and then for just to be 21 days later to be told you might not get to keep Edmund either, I finally felt like I just need to go in. I need to talk to my doctor. And it was an interesting conversation too. And I wrote that about that in my book too, where I wondered if I had said to my doctor, my human son just passed, if we would have gotten to where we ended up faster. But he still
mhm,
helped me get there, right? We still got to a place. And for me, it did require some anxiety medications for a couple of weeks because I really just wasn't okay. It was
mhm,
too much stress, and I was now having an external physical reaction
mhm.
to the stress. So truly, I mean, in this grief is still, it's your emotions, it's your brain. Your brain is an organ. If you broke your arm, you would go to a doctor. If you're not
Right.
doing well, go see a clinical professional.
Oh, thank you for saying that. I think so many people can relate too. And I know that, our pets experience grief as well. And
I
so
do.
I've heard a lot of stories where people have, one or more pets and maybe they're both senior and how the other one can show a decline in their
Yes.
health. And so we've really got to be holistic about it. And it's not only about caring for ourselves, but also our extra pets and our family at home. So
Yeah.
you guys, Erica has a bunch of resources on her website, petsourfamily.info, and so does wolfieswish.com. And we share a lot of tools, but you guys definitely go and check out her website and her book. So Erica, back to your book. I have read it. I loved it. Actually read it twice. The first time I skimmed it, and the second time I was like word for word. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So, what you guys, the first part of her book is about kind of qualifying in her story and her
Mm.
experiences, and just like how relatable it is to go through this journey without any training. And I
Yes.
use that word because I don't know what else to say. We don't have the tools to deal with these kinds of things that life throws at us. And then the end, would you say is it section 5 is where the
All
toolkit
those tools.
starts. I like
Yep.
calling it a toolkit.
I love
It's
it.
how to show up for people you know, how to
Mhm.
support yourself, what gifts are helpful. It's really cool. I've actually, Erica, I've looked at a lot of books and nothing like yours is out there. And that's why I'm so excited about it. And yeah, you guys, like she said, the mini cards, the Wolfie's Wish grieving cards are designed to be read once a day to help turn your thinking around and change your perspective, but acknowledge your grief and work on these baby steps. So those were my tools.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted, I wish I had EMDR because that sounds amazing. So we've like combined those so you can find those on her website or mine. Erica, are there any other places people should go for your, do you have any other recommended websites or, really good tools that you found where we can share?
I don't know about additional tools. I know Cornell has a hotline. I wrote about that in my toolkit. I love that word. That's a really good one. Because I think it's nice to see these bigger institutions start to recognize that this is really hard. So I wanted to make sure people knew about that. I think there's a live counselor that's there. But I love the partnership that we have in terms of I wrote my book to for two reasons really. One is for somebody who's going through it to know everything you're feeling is very normal, and
Mhm.
just it's like a hug for somebody else saying somebody else feels your pain too, and cry with me. Let's go through the journey together, feel all of it, and it's all valid. And then partnering it with your cards to say, but now let's actually like process the grief, this daily, redirect of how we think about the grief and who we lost. Um, I being able to go to your website and buy them as a combo, I'm really excited for that, for people to feel seen and to feel heard, and then to also have actual tools to process their emotions. Um, the other part of my book the reason I wrote it is for those who don't understand, right? Who don't understand, why is this so hard? How come they can't get it together? I've never had a pet. I don't understand why it's affecting them so much. It's also to bring them along the journey and to bring them into my life and to say, here's why. Um, and then the last part is all of the resources, whether it's you are in the middle of grieving and you're like, I can't possibly read a whole book. You just go straight to part 5 and get all the data validation that this is real. And here's templates and text messages you could send to ask for the help that you need, or here's emails to send to your boss to how do you get eased it back into work because you do have a lot of grief still happening. Um, but I really appreciated Dr. Lawler, Pet Loss Doctor's Instagram. I think her starting to post, and she posts multiple times a day. I needed that when I was going through my grief journey. I wish I had had your cards at the time, because I wasn't seeing anybody else saying this is normal. I felt really lucky that my dogs have an Instagram account. So at any time, somebody was willing to talk to me if I'm in the middle of my despair or they're telling me they're missing Kingston too, even if they've never met him. It meant everything to me.
Yeah.
Um, which is also goes back to the responsibility I feel, the fact that I could take off work, the fact that I had, 40,000 people on an Instagram account who were saying, we miss him too. I know that that's not normal, and I just really feel passionate that I know I wouldn't have been okay hadn't I had both of those things. So how do
Mhm.
we get those for other people?
Mhm.
Um, and that's, the pet bereavement at work. It's important, if even if it's a single day, for an employer to say in black and white, it signals to your employee, this is a real thing. And maybe that day offers that employee the opportunity to go to a doctor, to go to a therapist, or even just to validate, to say it is a real thing. Like whatever you need to do right now to feel better, right? Like let's start the path of healing. Um, but then with your cards too, I I think it's we go back to the question of like what else helped, and I think it's talking about it. I think something really beautiful about animals when they pass is if somebody passed who is a human being and you talk to somebody else about it, the initial gut reaction is not to say, "Oh, my uncle passed too, and here's how hard it was for me," right? Like you're there with the person when it's about a human being. But there's a really beautiful thing that happens when you talk about your pet that passed, and then somebody shares their story about their soul pet that passed. And now I talk about this earlier with you, where I call it these microwave friendships, where like in 3 minutes, right? I've shared my story, you've shared your story, and now we're so closely bonded because we experienced the same thing. And that grief is really just a testament to how much love there was between you and your animal. And I think that's really beautiful for us to be talking about bereavement leave and to be talking about grief and to be sharing and be vulnerable with each other as human beings because of our animals.
I totally agree. And I love that you brought up the sense of community and fellowship, if there's
Yes.
a better word, but that's
Yeah.
really how it felt to me. I heard about a Facebook group called the Rainbow Bridge Pet Loss Support Group. And I went on there one night completely broken and just, posted. And I think 142 comments showed up after of like, we understand, we're glad you're here. I know it's hard. I totally get it. And
Yeah.
I felt like I was being hugged from all over the world right away. And what I loved about
Yes.
the group is that when I was done or I needed to not think about it, I could just, exit Facebook app. And
Right.
so coming full circle, I started my own for the same reason. I just wanted to have a sense of community and have a place for people to go for that. Maybe they don't have friends and family or colleagues that
Mhm.
understand. So being online, you can be active, you can participate, or you cannot. And
Yep.
sometimes it's just enough to know that you're part of a group should you need it. So, guys, I really encourage listeners out there that if you're feeling alone or isolated, or even if you're having anticipatory grief where you have a senior pet, maybe they're not doing well, you've gotten a diagnosis, like go ahead and build that support community. You know what?
Yes.
Come to a Wolfie's Wish Pet Loss support group if you have a pet, period. And then we're there for you when you need it. I hope it's not for a long time, and I hope everyone gets to be with their pets as long as possible, but we have no guarantees, right? And so setting up a couple of like precautionary things just to know. And I think
Yes.
bookmarking Erica's website, wolfieswish.com, and her website again is petsourfamily.info. Then you know it's there on your browser for when you need to support someone or you yourself need support. You're
Yeah.
not scrambling and going, "Oh my gosh, what do I do?" So that's really where I like to come from, is a little bit of a preventative, we
Yes.
can't avoid the grief, but we can deal with it, we can handle it in healthier ways. Um,
I love
Erica,
that.
so I really appreciate you co-authoring this petition, and we want any listeners that want to have their friends or family or themselves supported with pet bereavement leave, go and sign our petition and share it so we can actually make these changes happen faster.
Yeah.
And I think that we've already gotten some momentum. Dr. Katie Lawler is in support of it. We've got some great organizations behind it, the IAOPCC, the IHCP. Um, so many people really support this, and that just means that the time is right. The time is now to ask for the help and support that we need.
Yeah.
And so, Erica, is there anything else you want people to know about your book or your resources? I feel like we've covered so much in like this short amount of time, and I love that. I love distilling it because people don't have an hour sometimes to listen to an episode, but I know our
Yeah.
listeners got a lot out of this so far.
Absolutely. I think one of the resources that I do have, so if you go to my website or even in my book, it's not only the resources for you as a pet guardian who has lost your pet and you're grieving and you need to know that it's real. But and also for those, if you're supporting somebody, here's some gifts that you could give, here's some text messages you could send, here's how you could show up for the somebody that you care about. But there's also an employer section. And so, I have referenced data from SHRM, which is the human resource governing body that's industry agnostic. They do it for all of industries in the United States. Some data from them around just the cost of unmanaged grief, right, in the workplace. It's like $225 billion. So there's a lot of statistics there on why an organization should care. And so I've got that as well as an email template you could send to your HR department to say, hey, I thought of something that might help from an employee retention or a talent attraction or, a way to support our current workforce that we have today. Here's some data. And so you can attach the data. I've got the template, and there's even FAQs for the HR manager because she's going to, or he or she is going to have to go back and talk to the executive team to get it approved. Around just guidelines, here's language you could use in your policy. So if you also are like, hey, I want to see if I can get this into my workplace, there's some tools there so you don't have to go up the hill on your own. And also my information is in there. So I've been asked to join some calls. I've been asked to send our policies, and I'm happy to share anything. I think it's that important. And it's to what you said around this preventative place, right? It's let's not rely on our line managers to just understand that this is a hard thing.
Mhm.
Um, And also from my own experience of I've had it in my policy and I still felt a lot of shame around it. By being able to have it in the policy ahead of time, even before you have a diagnosis, if you have an animal, right, or even for your family or friends in their own organizations, I think it's just if we could start doing it now, I think then it will be there when we need it.
Oh, that's so great. I love you. You're amazing. Um,
Same.
Erica, I'm gonna throw out what I call a magic wand question. And
Okay.
I want you to think about if you had a magic wand or were granted one wish that came true immediately, what would you wish for?
Wow. Wow. It's a beautiful question because it's very expansive to really just dream about what could it be. You know, I would wish for all of us to be able to give each other grace and understanding, even if we don't understand something. I wrote about in my book at the beginning, I even said, if you don't need to be convinced that this is a mission that we should all rally behind, you don't even have to read the first part of my book because it's about my life and it's about really I don't want anyone to feel like, "Oh, you're a CEO, you've got this cush life." Like, of course, the time you lost your dog is like the hardest thing you've ever been through in your life. And it's like, no, actually, I've been through really hard times. I came up through a challenging upbringing, and I'm going to let you into my life so that when I tell you this is the hardest thing, you believe me. Like, you really know that this is hard. But I even talked about like a really terrible ankle break, I think, at one point in my life that at the end I was like, you might even be judging, right? It's just an ankle break after all. But the point is it's something relatable that maybe you probably know somebody who has lost their pet or broke a bone or whatever it is. And it's just that unless you're going through it, you don't know the impact that it has on someone. And so if we can all just be a little kinder and offer some grace to each other, and just say, I might not understand, but I just want you to know I love you and I'm here for you. I think that could change everything. I think it could help people feel more safe and comfortable sharing their own challenges and then also be able to lean on your family and friends when you need them most.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Erica, for your vulnerability and your honesty. And can't wait to see what we accomplish together.
Me too. It's going to be wonderful. Really.